Meet Michael Maxsenti. Michael Maxsenti is running to represent California's 47th Congressional District, which includes Irvine, Laguna Beach, Newport Beach, Costa Mesa, Huntington Beach, and parts of Seal Beach. This is Michael's first campaign for public office, but for over 15 years, he's been a rebel for truth, championing political reform, government accountability, and a future where all Americans can truly thrive. Michael's leadership isn't about party lines, it's about common sense, integrity, and action. With a background that spans from high-level corporate leadership to grassroots activism, Michael has built businesses, challenged broken systems, and always stood up for what's right. Now he's ready to lead a populist movement for everyday Americans, fighting for economic opportunity, a healthier nation, and a government that actually serves the people. How does someone go from multimillionaire executive and small business owner to Uber driving activist, only to return and run for Congress? That's Michael's story, and he's just getting started. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Scarlett. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you. How are you?
Very good, very good. Exciting times and challenging.
I don't think we ever really met in person, but I feel like I know you for a long time.
We shared a lot of Zooms together.
Yeah, we were in that Zoom volunteer call every single week for the last year. To be honest, I was never interested in politics. I only got involved in Kennedy's campaign because of my children. I'm a special needs mom, and Kennedy was the only person running for president who really had a plan to save our children, to end this chronic disease epidemic in our children. So I got involved, and half of the time I didn't know what was going on in those meetings. So I was just sitting quietly and listening and watching. And you and the other grassroots campaign leaders were very, very informative, very, very helpful. I was watching you guys discussing issues, and it really, really helped me understand presidential politics, what they're about. And yeah, I am so very, very grateful to you and to the other grassroots leaders.
It's been a long process of learning to be able to have an understanding of what's going on, which is why I decided to end up running. So we'll get into that in a second, though. But thank you.
From what I understand, you are first and foremost a family guy. You prioritize fatherhood above all the other endeavors in your life. And you have, career-wise, you have had an amazing journey. You have been a corporate executive. You have been small business owner. Through that journey, what made you decide, I want to start a political career at the age of 75, right?
Well, that's running for office. I actually started my political journey. Let me back up then, since I actually was going to run originally. I was a political science major back in college, and I'd followed politics fairly closely, and was actually considering running for Congress, was being groomed, if you will, by the congressman here, a 9-term congressman who I befriended when I was the COO of a joint venture startup for Nissan and another Japanese company. I built a manufacturing plant, oversaw building it. I didn't physically do it. Oversaw building a manufacturing plant here in Irvine. And when we had this amazing grand opening, because Chris Cox is his name. He was our congressman, an incredibly great congressman. He couldn't make it to the grand opening along with many others, but he came by the week later, asked if he could come by and meet me, and we toured. We hit it off. He and I were about the same age, and we struck up a friendship. I then became a part of his inner circle with half a dozen or so others, and he made me a delegate to the 1993 California Republican Convention with the goal to go there and start to meet the people and learn the inside workings of the political party here in California, with the goal of starting to run for Congress then. But shortly thereafter, while I was immersed in a number of groups here, the Lincoln Club and all these others, something happened where I was on the board of directors at Children's Hospital. I founded an event there called Heroes of the Heart. And the first event, the keynote speaker, who Congressman Cox introduced me to, was William Bennett. William Bennett, for those who don't know who he is, back in 1994, he was at that time being pretty much recognized as the leading next Republican candidate for president. And he had been the drug czar and the education czar, and he was a major national figure. We had dinner together at the event, Heroes of the Heart. And he, the week before, just announced that he was no longer going to seek or accept the endorsement for president. So I asked him why. And he says, Mike, I've been in politics all of the life of my sons. They are entering high school and one middle school, if I remember correctly. And he says, this is the most important time in their life where they need their father with them. And he says, so I decided to step back from the political limelight to put parenting, being a parent first. And my son at that time was just he had just turned 3 in February 27th of 1995. I remember the date exactly. And that stuck with me. And I had made a promise and a prayer after my wife and at the time and my mother, my daughter, we had lost 2 children early in the marriage, right after we got married, in miscarriages. And after the second one, which was traumatizing to her, she went back on the pill for 10 years. And she had come to me and asked me to get permanent birth control. This is very personal, but I think it's kind of important to the story. And asked me to get permanent birth control. I said no, because I would still want another child. She stormed away. She was all upset at me for being a typical male, leaving the reproductive issues up to the woman. But about a month went by and she said, you'd still like a child, wouldn't you? And I said, yes. She agreed, and he had to go off the pill for 1 year starting from that day. Well, I was having this grand opening of this manufacturing company. And so a little bit shorter, Michael was conceived on Mother's Day weekend, revealed as my Father's Day gift, and he was born 8 days late naturally on the morning of Valentine's Day. And from the moment he was born, I remembered the commitment I'd made to God. And so 9 months later, I had an opportunity to resign as a COO of that company and take a nice buyout package, since I had been the founder of it. And I decided to do that, and then put being a father ahead of making more money. I made more money than I ever dreamed of in my life. Had a beautiful big home that I built in Laguna Beach, etc. And I said, I want to be a father and commit myself to being the best parent I can be and helping others in the community. And that's what's pulled me away from politics until, fast forward, he's graduated from high school. And that was 2010 when he was graduating high school. And that's when we were still just beginning to come out of a recession. And then that's for another part of the story of where I got back into politics.
That's amazing. So your son has the same birthday as my daughter.
Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
And he actually has one of my dear friends, couple, they have a son born on Valentine's Day, and they were actually the people at their dinner party that got me relaunched into politics. But they have a son born on Valentine's Day who's 6 years older, Michael, and they call themselves birthday brothers.
Oh my
And
God.
we were
Yeah,
very
that's
close
amazing.
and spent a ton of time together. And they're still refer themselves as birthday brothers. I've looked at Michael as a truly a gift, and he's been an amazing gift. Even though his mother and I got divorced when he was 12, uh, he has been a gift to both of us, and forever grateful for that. He changed the course of my life. Changed the course of my life. And now you had mentioned your daughter was a special needs. Do you mind sharing what her needs are?
My daughter isn't special needs. She's the most quote unquote normal kid in the family. It's the two boys who have difficulties. I strongly suspect that their difficulties have something to do with the medical stuff. And that is what really drew me to Mr. Kennedy and his presidential campaign, because he's the only person who really cared about children's health. He's the only person who's made a career out of helping children. So that's why I was really, really motivated to help with his campaign.
I spent 14 years on two boards at Children's Hospital, the Foundation Board and the Padrinos Board. And one of the main reasons I did that was out of gratitude for having been blessed with a healthy daughter and then a son, and knowing how tragic that would be if I hadn't had that blessing, and what it must feel like to be those parents. And when I was out during the Kennedy campaign, I helped plan and participated personally in 139 events. And at many of those events, I was standing next to mothers and sometimes fathers who were what you would call the tiger moms, who had had children who had been severely damaged, and they could directly link it in their cases to the vaccines. And when they would be there and tell me the stories, and I met some of their sons, both, it would tear my heart out to see the effect that these vaccines improperly given, and let's leave it at that because there's still lots of research to be done. But, well, backing up for a second, Kennedy has spoken about this, and I'm of the same generation. When I was a kid, we got 5 vaccines. We had a couple of doses of a couple of them, but that was spread out over a number of years. And by the time we were 18, we only had 5 vaccines and maybe a total of 8 or 10 total doses of that. And they worked great for the vast, overwhelming majority. And there was 1 in 10,000 kids approximately, and there's no hard number on that data because it wasn't being collected accurately then, that had autism. And people in my generation, it's a rarity. I mean, I could never even think of ever having met somebody of my age group, a baby boomer, that had autism. Now, a friend of mine who works over in maintenance at one of the local high schools here, we were talking last year, and he was explaining to me how they had 6 full-size classrooms at this high school of literally about 1,600 kids with full 30 kids or more in them with autism.
Yeah.
And these were the ones who are autistic enough to attend a public school that were relatively high-functioning autism.
Yeah.
And what Kennedy was always about was doing the proper research on what is behind the connection. Why has this explosion of autism happened over the last 20, 30 years since that bill was passed in 1986 and opening up vaccines for everybody? But I know you have some very specific questions you'd like to ask, and let's get into that. I don't want to ramble. It's easy to do that. One last thing I want to make a comment about Kennedy. Having had the opportunity to meet him a number of times and then spend a number of hours in a lot of Zooms with him, small group Zooms for the most part, there is nobody living that I know personally that I have more respect for than him. And he is one of the main reasons why I decided to get involved and take this leap of faith to go to Washington to help implement the policies and the health policies that he is going to help drive to the forefront that need to be put into legislation to continue on to make our children healthy.
That statement actually gave me goosebumps because I just so wholeheartedly agree with you. He was the driver for me to like really get into politics. I knew nothing about politics to begin with, and during this past year, on the campaign, I learned a lot. And he is the main driver for me to start this podcast. I admire your courage and your willingness to do good. Especially, I think you could just lay back and have a good life, enjoy what life has to offer at this stage. But instead, you chose to step up and try to make this world a better place than you found it.
The reason I chose to get involved in 2010 was I had reflected back on my life, and I was one of the very luckiest, in my opinion, to have been born in one of the sweet spots in the world. I was born in the South Bay. My mom and grandparents in Hermosa Beach and Redondo. And that was an amazing and wonderful time to be born in America and in that area. And then I had been taken from, my father was a laborer in a factory ever since he came home from World War II. And he had been orphaned. His mom died trying to give childbirth at 3 with what would have been his brother. They both died. His father, in the Great Depression of 1923, committed suicide. And so as a little 5-year-old boy, he was left alone with no immediate relatives. He was taken in by some 2 distant uncles from Italy. They had come through Ellis Island, his parents. And I was reflecting on the sacrifice. When I was a little boy, my father never talked about the war, ever, except when I would be with him at a reunion of the survivors of his army group. And I would be in the room sitting on the floor next to them while they would be sharing and talking about their experiences. And I never forgot those. I was amazed at what they saw, the sacrifices that they witnessed. And then I was in that first lottery. Well, before I even graduated high school, 2 of my classmates had already been killed in Vietnam. And I was in that first lottery. And I had gone down to San Diego State to play football there and had this wonderful upbringing with 2 great parents. And then got to go to a great high school. I had the opportunity to do a lot of things there. And then I was at San Diego State as a sophomore during that first lottery. One of my roommates was chosen number 1 in the lottery. His number came up. I was number 166. And I decided to stay and take my chances. And if you did do that for the first year, you were then given a deferment if you were in for at least a year and didn't get called. My draft board went to 162. By the time I left San Diego State, a few years later, a number of the guys that were called never came home, were killed. A number of the others who did come home had come home severely wounded in many cases. One of the guys lived in a duplex right below me, and almost every single night he would wake up screaming with nightmares of being pinned down and all of his platoon being killed and him shot up. I think he got 7 machine gun bullets. And those kind of sacrifices resonate with me when I now was hitting 60, just turning 60. He was like, I've been given this amazing life, raised my family in Laguna Beach for 35 years, just been traveling to Europe and Asia and numerous times, had all these great opportunities. And I was thinking, well, I've never had to sacrifice anything for these. And that's where, when we were in that depression, coming out of it in 2010, and I began to learn of all the corruption and what was the driving force behind these endless wars, why these problems weren't being solved. That's when I started to say, I've got to get involved, and this is my time to give back. And so that's what started me on this journey in 2010, was out a sense of gratitude for my life, my son, the people that I had grown to love and love me.
Tell us about your platform, your policies, and your plan is once you get into office.
Well, I would encourage everybody to go to my website, which is just quite simply maxsentiforcongress.com. Go there, if you would, and go to the issues. And I've chosen 4 most impactful things that I think I can contribute to, and in 4 more long-range issues. And I'm not going there alone. I mean, I don't kid myself for a minute that I can do this alone. But I'm going there. There's people already elected, like a Thomas Massey, a Kevin Kiley, and others. But there's a national group that I'm a part of that is trying to elect as many people as possible into the House of Representatives so that we can pass the kind of legislation that we've been given the opportunity to right now. So I've chosen the 4 major issues. First and foremost, the most impactful thing I can work on and contribute to, and with others, is to make an economy that works for everyone. And I encourage people just to go there and take a look at those. I could go into detail with them, but first and foremost is we've got to make an economy that works for everyone. And then a health revolution to make America healthy again. Basically everything MAHA stands for and more. But when I speak of a health revolution, and Bobby spoke of it, it's not just physically, mentally, spiritually. It's also economically and environmentally that we need to make America healthy again. And then the third element is, how do we pay for all that? And what's been going on with this incredible 36, and there's a lot of ways to count the debt, but 36 going on $37 trillion that dramatically drives up interest rates, the cost of living for everybody. So have the third major topic is how Washington is spending away our future. And not just talk about, there are 6 very specific types of legislation that need to be passed in Congress, because Congress is the one that controls the purse strings, and the House is the one that sets that budget. The Senate then has to approve it, and the president signs it into law. But there's a few things that I've mentioned on the website, like zero-based budgeting. And basically it just simply stated, every program that's been passed or is going to pass has to prove its worth. And you can see it from what DOGE is uncovering and others, the incredible abuses of our tax dollars, the incredible inefficiency of those. And we can all look around. My wife's just dealing with changing her into Social Security, and the difficulties and the hours she spent on the phone to get transitioned her card, for example. Third major thing I mentioned is the balanced budget amendment. And there has been a group for many years trying to get a balanced budget amendment off, requiring Washington to spend responsibly within a budget that they actually pass. And then a debt to GDP cap, which sets a maximum limit ratio to prevent further economic decline. And then fifth is inflationary spending. Require impact reviews before passing any spending bills. Look at the costs and really study that before you pass it. And then lastly, one of the most important ones is, if you don't pass a budget, simply no budget, no pay. If Congress fails to pass a budget, they forfeit their salaries. And it's not retroactive, but once they do it, they get repaid. If you can't do your job, one of the most important parts of your job is to fiscally steward our nation forward, not handing off debt and driving up the cost of living and handing off debt to future generations. That's unacceptable. Then I go into one of the other major issues for me is fighting for education and parental rights. And I go into some of the specifics there. Then the ones that are a little less dramatically impacting everyday life for the constituents here is we've got to fix the immigration system that has been ignored. 1988, the Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, and President Reagan signed a major piece of legislation that they had worked on, both parties, a bipartisan. Tip O'Neill, for those who don't know him, he was the leading Democrat in the nation. President Ronald Reagan was a Republican. The House and Senate and President came together, drafted an amazing, comprehensive immigration package that's never been implemented, ever. And yet it was passed into law, signed into law, and both parties have ignored it for differing reasons. But that's why we find this incredible problem in our nation right now. So we've got to fix that and secure the borders. And also, the next item I talk about is delivering energy security without environmental sacrifice. We have to drive down the cost of energy, make energy, and at the end, the needs of AI and all the technology going forward is dramatically increasing our need for energy. But we have to deliver that energy, but at the same token, we must do it with total environmental attention and without any environmental sacrifice. Quite the opposite. We have to heal our planet, and that's another part. And then the next big issue, and this is one I want to get into heavily in Congress, is how to end big money's control of Washington. On the website, I list again 6 of the major pieces of legislation that have been proposed year after year, but have never been passed or implemented. Because we have all these career politicians who've gone to Washington to make it a career, they want to get reelected, and they need money, and they want to make themselves, their family, and their friends rich. And so there's 6 pieces of legislation I mentioned. I'll only name a couple here. No Congressional Insider Trading Act, allowing themselves and their families to profit off the laws they write. Right now, they know they're going to pass a piece of legislation. They go out and make stock trades and buy short, buy long, and tell all their friends about it, make all kinds of money on it. They've never passed legislation to stop that. They ignore the Lifetime Congressional Integrity Act, which would keep the revolving door between the lobbyists and themselves, would shut that door so that they're not there beholden to the lobbyists, knowing that as soon as they leave office, they're going to have some super high paid, easy job if they work with the lobbyists to pass it. I don't want to go through all 6 of them, but Stop Congressional Profiteering Act, a simple act that would keep them from making secret stock trades. And worst of all, they refused the Congressional Accountability Act. They pass, many laws have been passed that we have to live by, that they purposefully write out a place in the law so they don't have to follow those laws. They don't impose the same laws on us. This is out and out corruption. It's why Washington is broken. And if they had integrity, these laws would have already been in place. And that's why we have to eliminate these lifetime career paths for people that make it a career path. You should go there with a commitment to serve the nation, serve our Constitution and the people. And then the last item that I go into that I want to focus on is building a 21st century government that works for the people. And there's a lot of use of technology. And one of the most important things that I want to see brought in as quickly as possible is the people's voice. One of the things that I've noticed and learned over the last 15 years, almost every one of these groups, that issue-based groups that are fighting over something, and you see it all the time right now with Doge. And I just went to a big event 2 weeks ago where 60 activist groups were there. And almost every single one of them were there over some law that's written that is having amazingly bad and difficult unintended consequences. Right now, most of our legislature is there from attorneys who are there as trained advocates to win. All they care about is scoring political points for their party and themselves so they can get reelected and control. They're not trained in, as I was in business and in the community, to solve problems. They want to use legislation to stop everything so they can say a win. I stopped this. I want to go there and say, no, let's bring as many of the stakeholders together on issues. Let's have citizens' assemblies, for example. And I don't want to take the time to go into it here, but citizens' assemblies are a great tool that's being used in many states and localities throughout the country and around the world. To, before you finalize a legislation, you bring together a holistic group of citizens and charge them with learning deep about the problem, the issue, and helping write the final solution so that you can get 90+% of engagement from the people, support, because they have helped. They've not just helped, they've almost written the legislation from all of the perspectives. So there's very little, if any, unintended consequences that come out. And that's the kind of legislation that we need, is to integrate into the process the people themselves who have to experience and live with the pieces of legislation. And those are some of the things about modernizing, all kinds of great technology tools that can be used, like AI and other things. But I rambled on too long. But
Citizens Assembly.
Citizens Assembly, yeah.
I have been thinking recently about, all of the bills that, especially in California, that they pass without much knowledge. Like the news reports don't report them. I think there's only a handful of people who are very extremely interested in politics. They will share information about the bills, but otherwise they pass certain bills without even us knowing about it, even though we are the people who get affected the most.
These citizen assemblies are, because I was tasked with turning around a company that had been once a profit leader in the industry. That when I was made president of the Division of American Standard, I'd been with that company at that time for 9 years, 8 or 9 years. When I got the opportunity to turn it around, it was made president. And I turned it around in a year. But how I did it was I engaged the 240 plus employees in that division. And we started, the first thing we did was I had a company-wide meeting. We had all the divisions. We brought in, and everybody from all the departments started redesigning the company. And we did. And over the course of the next 6 months, we wrote all the operating procedures, rewrote them the second time, kept editing them, updating them. And we turned the company around in a year. And when I had to build a company from scratch, you got to sit back and engage. You can't have the answers. You've got to engage people with good in-depth knowledge of the circumstance, the issue. And on the other hand, people who are going to have to deal with whatever you're passing or putting in as a rule or a procedure. Yeah. And then you have to listen and let and guide a process. We have all these people, most of them, and it's over 70% of them are all attorneys, are legal trained there. And the other 30%, very few of them have actually built a business or turned a business around and managed hundreds or thousands of people to do so. And they just think that they can come up from their privileged backgrounds and write what sounds like a good piece of legislation in theory. And then it's devastating. California is a great example. It's the epitome of the worst example. California state has, I don't remember the exact number, it's 400,000+ pieces of regulation to operate a business and live in California. 400,000+ regulations. The next most state is New York with just over 200,000, slightly less than half. The average state of the other 48 states average 68,000 regulations. Uh-huh. We've had a state legislature and governor that's signed them in that has passed over 400,000 pieces of legislation that micromanage things from a perspective of that is, we can see the results of all around us. Mm-hmm. And a citizens assembly would dramatically change that if they had to write a piece of legislation in draft form, then bring together the citizens and experts and refine it before it ever became law, we wouldn't have this. And then we wouldn't have 400,000, because most of those should have been, all laws should always be put a sunset date on them, that they have to be reviewed and proven their success, or they go away. Instead of just passing a law that sits on the books that can be arbitrarily applied by somebody against somebody else for their benefit when they want it to be. So I could go off on tangents. I spent 15 years in learning all this, immersed in these issues on what is the root causes. My goal is to always go to a root cause of a problem and then find people who can help create and craft solutions, and then test those solutions and make sure that they're effective. And that's something that's missing in Congress. But that's something that I and others want to lead the charge on, changing the way we operate our government so that it becomes efficient and effective in delivering the absolute needs essential for our citizens to thrive.
So how do you go about organizing citizens assembly? I think California is really in dire need to have one.
Well, it's not one. It's a citizens assembly around each issue or each proposed legislation. People can Google it. Just Google citizens assemblies, and there's lots of examples. In fact, there's a great one I was going to read about. I've gone to some conferences. I'm going to one in May again, where some of the leaders in the citizens assembly movement will have new updated examples. But it's being used. The last assembly we had, called the American Democracy Summit, was in Los Angeles 2 years ago in September. In May, we're having the next one in Phoenix. And Petaluma, for example, is a great example here in California. But 124 countries use these regularly to help craft laws and pieces of legislation. Yes, if they Google citizens assemblies, they can come up with some great examples. Like I said, there's, at last count, I've heard 124 countries using them on various levels, on various issues and topics.
That's actually one of the issues I've been thinking lately, because California is always passing some ridiculous laws. Like incumbent, you're challenging Dave Min, right? He pushed this, what is it, AB 1995 or something? That's basically gives the school, the teachers, the right to transition school kids without telling their parents.
Oh, this is absolutely these kind of laws, and where our government in the state of California and nationally has been trying to decouple parents from their children. And there are examples, the rare examples, though, of parent abuse. We're not being naive. Parents aren't perfect, but overwhelmingly, without any parents will do anything. They'll stop a bullet for their child. All they want is to create opportunities for their child to have an opportunity to thrive and be healthy and happy. And they're trying to decouple parents' rights from the children by passing legislation like this that says a kid can transition without telling their parents. Wait a minute, you can't get a driver's license until you're 16 for good reason. And in states between 18 and 21, you're not allowed to drink, because people have to grow in maturity and live life experiences before you can be entrusted with different things that can damage yourself or others. To think that some school administrator has more authority over making decisions to allow your child who's going through some traumatic experience. Almost everybody I know
part of growing up. People
exactly
get confused, and they get and also like they get groomed so much at school. I'm not bigot. I don't discriminate people like on their sexual preferences, but to actively groom children at school with the rainbow flags, with the sexual ideology, that is gone too far. Children at school, their task is to learn stuff. They learn English, learn math, life skills, not to focus on sexuality. That is it doesn't matter if it's homosexuality or the other types. It's not it shouldn't be their focus to begin with.
Part of being a good parent is helping your child go through those periods of maturation, because almost every child, as they grow up, questions their sexuality. And that's part of learning and growing who you are. To make a decision when you're going through that, and based upon the kind of things that they're being presented as, it's normal to do these things, and ask them to make a decision at those early ages that they're going to live with for the rest of their life. Why we don't send them off to war, why we don't give them driver's license, because there's a period of maturation that you need to go through. And parents, they're their children. They're no one else's child except for God's. And no school or anybody else should take authority over them unless, in the rarest of circumstances, there is truly a proven abusive parent. That's obviously exceptions, and there's exceptions to everything. It's one of the things that I feel very strongly about as well.
Those bills are the reason that I was thinking about, like, we really, really need citizen oversight over what the assembly, what the state senate are doing with all those bills. They come up with all sorts of strange bills, and like we don't even hear about them, and then they just pass them, and then the citizens get controlled by those nonsense bills.
And in today's world, there's no excuse for not giving the citizens and those who would be impacted by any piece of legislation to have the opportunity to speak up in advance, learn about it in its details, and speak up and point out the unintended consequences or the consequences, and express themselves in a meaningful way. Right now, they claim through town halls and all this, they listen. But we know every election cycle, they tell us everything we want to do. We're going to do this. We're going to fix that. We're going to change that. And what have they delivered? They've delivered the results that we live in. And those are unacceptable.
There are a few issues that are really close to my heart I would like to discuss with you. And I mean, like, just get your view and what you're going to do once you are in office. First and foremost, the childhood vaccine schedule and mandates, especially the mandates. And how do we repeal the 1986 Act, the liability shield for the pharmaceutical industry?
That is an incredibly important piece of legislation that I hope will already be on the floor and passed by the time I get in, because I won't take office technically until January of 2027. And that's hopefully that there's enough people under Kennedy's leadership in the HHS, and then people that are currently in the House. That is one of the most important pieces of legislation that needs to be changed. But Big Pharma, that's why we see they're the leading advertiser on all of our TV and mainstream media. And they are some of the biggest donors to almost all of the legislators, both in the Senate and the House. And that's why these laws are there. Hopefully, because of the MAHA movement and Kennedy's movement, that enough legislators will have the courage to stand up and say no more to that money and do the right thing. So I'm hoping it's gone. If it's not gone, that is one of the highest things that I'll be working on, because that's so at the core of the damage. And what Kennedy's all about is getting parents to have knowledge about it, freedom of choice based upon information. And if you want to have your child get 6 vaccines before they leave the hospital and a newborn, if you know the risks, fine. If you want to go in there in 6 months or a year and get another 6 or 10 doses of some vaccines, fine, as long as you're keenly aware of the risks that you're running versus the option of walking out of the hospital with only 1 or 2 or vaccines, and in 6 months another 1 or 2, stair-stepping them in to allow your child's immune system to develop fully and properly. I'm glad you raised that bill up, because for those watching that aren't real understanding of it, what that 1986 bill did, when it passed, they had already stepped up. Like when I said the CDC requirement was basically 5 vaccines, by 1986, I believe, if my memory serves right, it was now 23 or 25 vaccines were required by the time you were 18. When they changed that law, shielding the pharmaceutical companies from liability, today, not including any of the COVID vaccines requirements or suggestions, without that alone, today the CDC requirement, and it has been this way for, I don't know, 20 years, I believe, it's 83, I believe, is the number of required vaccines if you follow the CDC guidelines, of which most public schools do.
I get cornered by the school district all the time to get my kids jabbed. And there was a time where they were pushing for the mRNA injections on children.
Some people understand about the MNRA, and I'm not a scientist, and so don't quote me specifically, but from my readings of a lot of reading on it, the difference in the vaccines that we had was actually taken from a virus that was actually a living virus that we were injected with a low dose of it, so that our bodies would fight off, but we would get a very low dose of that illness and fight it off.
Yeah.
And so your body would develop a natural immune, so you never got it again. And we never did get those illnesses again. Or if we did, we got them in such a low degree that you hardly even noticed it. But these new ones are synthetically made. They're not natural. And what they're doing is they're going in and synthetically trying to direct our immune systems to create antibodies that are foreign to our bodies. They're not naturally driven. And that's why there's so many repercussions, because it's not the natural way for our body to do it. And nature is amazing if given the opportunity to function the way it was intended.
Yeah. For COVID is a respiratory disease. You don't inject the pathogen into the bloodstream and hope that you'll be able to fight it off. There are just many problems. I don't think we need to go into those problems, but the data are out there, how damaging those injections are for human health. That many people died, many people got disabled for life. That is a fact. Nobody can really legitimately defend mRNA anymore. So now that we are on the topic of mRNA, what would you do to basically the consensus in the MAHA community is to ban it completely from human use as well as livestock use?
My approach to these kind of highly technical issues is to rely on and listen to people like Robert Kennedy and the people that he'll bring forth, and again, a holistic understanding of it. From what I know, from my perspective, banning it would be totally effective and appropriate. However, there may be some rules, and I think it's, for me, I don't like to jump to conclusions on exactly what I would do until we have more evidence, and I hear it exactly from trusted experts. And when I say trusted experts, I mean people that are there and have proven history of their trust. One of the things people talk about is how upset they are at these layoffs. And Bobby Kennedy and the shakeup, taking 27 group departments and taking it down to 15. And people are all upset. Oh, we're going to, it's like, wait a minute. If these people have been doing their job well, and I know most of those are well-intentioned, good people, but I think of it, if you're remodeling a house, you've got a house that's been around for 30 years, and from somebody walks in, it's functioning very good, and it looks like it's okay, but the inner workings of it are falling apart, and you want to upgrade it, you want to update it. When you go in and remodel, the first stage of remodeling is really ugly. And you make a few mistakes when you pull down a wall that maybe you shouldn't have until you pull it down and go, oh, whoops, we need to rebuild that one. But the remodel process is ugly, and things that you used to like and were grown accustomed to are now gone away. But then once the finished product is there and it starts to take shape, even when the drywall goes up Now all of a sudden you can start beginning hope. And what I hope people will understand is we're at that ugly stage of tearing down, removing that which has become obsolete and ineffective, proven to be ineffective, and the rebuilding, the putting back in the new things, the new operating procedures, the new expectations. That hasn't started even yet, other than the new expectations of a vision of making America the healthiest nation in the world. And that's the goal that we all need to be working towards, how to make our country the healthiest, physically, mentally, spiritually, economically, and environmentally.
Another issue that's really close to my heart is the food safety. I know Kennedy is going to eliminate the grass pathway. For the audience who are not aware of what grass is, it's generally recognized as safe. There's just a slew, I think there's like 1,000 ingredients that are petrochemical ingredients that the food manufacturers put in our food, the packaged food, claim they're generally recognized as safe, but in fact, there's no data that prove they are safe. But we do have them. The Europeans banned them, and we still have them in our food supply. So I am glad that Kennedy is going to eliminate that pathway. However, what are we going to do with the existing ingredients that are grass, but we know from a common sense point of view, they're not safe? And why can't we just adopt wholesale the European standard and just ban them from market completely right now, right away?
That is something that I believe is something in the works and needs to be done. Whether we adopt 100% exactly what the European done, but we need to do something very similar, if not exactly. And this, I want to drive home a point here for the audience. This is why I talk repeatedly about electing career politicians. These issues just didn't happen overnight. This has been an ongoing problem. Our deterioration of our health has been ongoing for many years. We didn't just overnight wake up one day and had 40+% obese in this country, et cetera, with all the chronic disease. This has been a long-term path over the last 20, 30 years, growing significantly. The European Union, what should make everybody upset is the knowledge that companies like Kellogg's and others have two formulations. And our Congress, which is supposed to have the oversight, and the HHS, and all those people who are supposed to be looking out for our health, look the other way or were incompetent, one or the other or both. These career politicians have allowed this to happen while they're accepting tons of donations from the lobbyists of these industries. But we have, as you mentioned, over 1,000 allowed chemicals in the processing of our food. And at Kellogg's, for example, and I'll call them out, Coca-Cola and others, McDonald's and others, who have two formulations. A formulation that they can sell in America using a whole host, 1,000 or more chemicals in the food processing that allows them to make incremental increased profits per unit over what they sell to Europe and the rest of the world. And that is pathetic. All those people who have any knowledge of that inside of those companies deserves, in my opinion, to be fired, demoted, reprimanded, whatever. But they look the other way to allow their company to pay their stockholders and their executive management more money because they could make a little more profit selling Americans a product that was going to knowingly put us at risk, even if they didn't acknowledge the direct linkage. But gee, why are Americans so unhealthy and the Europeans significantly healthier? And anybody who's traveled the world knows this easily. You travel to Europe, you eat their food and have a big dinner there, you feel totally different than how you feel if you eat a big dinner similarly produced in America. Mm-hmm. The difference of those ingredients, and all of these companies knowingly, just to make a little more profit, formulated a product here that was connected to the loss of our health. and they didn't care because they just wanted the more profit.
I do still have like three things. First of all, I would like you to share like what is a day like in a man who is running for Congress. That's one. And then I would like you to share a little bit about the incumbents that you are challenging, Dave Min. I think he's got a really bad track record. And then I would like you to share like how people find you and support you, what people can do to make things right. Basically, the Democrats are running down our country, they're running down our state, and make a call of action what people can do.
First and foremost, my day starts typically at 6 a.m. I get up, I have my morning prayers, and I'll spend usually 2 hours, one, responding now to social media that we've got, and two, reading on issues of the day from the news sources from yesterday. Then I take a break for an hour and a half to go take a hard walk with my dog and exercise. I have different routines, but I try to dedicate on average an hour and a half every morning or every day to exercise, because this is a marathon. And I've been on it for 15 years, and this is my last particular new marathon I'm running. But then I'll come back, have a bite to eat, and then I try to break up my day into 2 to 3 hour increments with calls and meetings or both. And then I'll work usually then from about 10:30 to 12:30, doing emails, returning calls. Then I'll take a break for lunch. Then I'll come back and work another 2 hour slot. Then I'll usually take a nap in the mid to late afternoon, take a nap, get up, take a short walk with my dog to get invigorated again, come back and work for a couple of hours reading. I do a lot of reading and listening to podcasts and reading. I have a whole host of investigative reporters that I've been following for a number of years, most of them. And then I'll break for dinner, then shower, clean up a bit, go back to my desk until my wife comes in and taps me on the shoulder when she says, okay, it's time to go downstairs. And then I'll sit with her and watch whatever television she wants, from American Idol to The Voice, whatever she wants. And I'll dedicate the last 2 hours of my night to her, and then get to bed, try to get to bed and asleep by 11 so I can get up the next day and do it all over again. So that's the routine. And I have to call out my wife, because she is an amazing support system. I don't know of many people who would be with me through, when she and I got married, I was living that life of privilege. And then we went through a period where I sold my business. And then, unfortunately, the people I sold it to bankrupted it, which wiped out our retirement, which gave me an opportunity to go from that perspective of privilege to be immersed in what it takes to survive, and do that, and then come back, and which was part of the opening, which is how do you go from a multimillionaire business executive to an Uber driver and come back? But I had made a commitment, and my wife stood by me. When we found out that the company I'd sold and I'd carried back the paper, that the investment banker that bought it bankrupted it, and instead of getting this nice retirement paid out over the next many years, it was gone. Sued them, we won in court, but that was our entire retirement, basically, other than a pension and savings and things that we had. Then I had a choice: go back to work for corporate America on somebody else's schedule, or figure out a way, accept a downsizing and downscaling of our life dramatically, and figure out a way to survive, so I could stay in this fight. And so my wife lovingly and understood the need of what we were working on and my commitment to it. And she says, whatever you want to do, I'll support you. Friend of mine recommended I started driving Uber. So I started driving Uber. She started doing daycare work, taking care of dog sitting. And we did that. took early retirement from Social Security, my pension early. She took her Social Security early, and we were able to carve out enough of an income from all those different sources so that I could become a founder of the Common Sense Party and do this work over the last 15 years and stay in this arena fighting for this. And you'd said sacrifice. I look at my sacrifice, and when we've had tough days, and we've had a share of them, and I'd look at her and I'd say, there's nobody shooting at us. I'm not eating any of my dinners out of a ration can, and I didn't sleep last night in a foxhole in the rain. So if this is as tough as it gets, so be it. Suck it up. Let's go.
Lovely, lovely. Yeah.
So Dave Min, to answer your next question, was Dave Min. Dave is a typical political career politician. Typical people like we have in Congress and Senate. Went to an elite school, graduated from Wharton, went to Harvard, came out of Harvard, was given a position on a staff as an advisor to Chuck Schumer in the Democratic leadership, the highest ranking Democrat in the Senate. Then he goes from there. They're moving back out to California. And then soon as it opened up for a California state Senate seat, boom, he was plugged in, given millions of dollars of endorsements, and got the California State Democratic seat here in this district, where for 4 years, he rubber stamped all of those policies that you were talking about and we were talking about earlier in this state. For 4 years, he was a rubber stamp to the state Democratic leadership here. And then magically, as soon as Katie Porter exits this seat to go to run for Senate, boom, they move him right over, and boom, he gets $8 million or more into his campaign to run and win Katie Porter's former seat, to hold this seat and go off to Washington now, and his next step in the ladder of his career to rubber stamp. There he is at the shoulders of Chuck Schumer and Waters on the policies of the Democratic Party. All the while, he's talking about how he's going to stop this, and everything he talks about for Trump is about stopping Trump through the use of law. Typical thing that all they care about is winning, instead of saying, wow, this looks like it could have a terrible impact on my constituents. Let's get together and talk about what we need to do together to solve the problem so that we can work together and come up with a solution. We know that we've got some significant waste and abuse that Congress hasn't dealt with properly, which is getting the nicest thing I can say. Instead, we're just going to take them to court and use the law to stop them, instead of saying, no, we've got a problem. Let's work together to solve it. All they're interested in doing is stopping it so that they can't, quote, Trump and the Republican Party can't get a win, and they can get seen as they get the win because they stopped it. It's all about wins and losses instead of solutions. And that's what drives me crazy watching these career politicians in office. And lastly, how can people help? It's totally grassroots. I don't have millions of dollars, and they're saying, oh, all these millionaires are coming at them. No, this is not some millionaire coming at them, folks. I'm a renter in Irvine who, after 39 years of ownership, had to go into renting, and I've been renting now for the last 12 years, driving Uber, working just to pay the bills to survive, to continue to do this work. So I need grassroots help. I need people to step up. The things that they can do, first and foremost, is go to our website, maxsentiforcongress.com, and I'm sure you'll should have that in your notes. And then I'd ask them to do just a couple things. One is, first and foremost, get more familiar with me. Question what I've said. Challenge what I've said. Look at my true history to validate that what I've said, I've got a life story behind it that backs up that I am who I say I am. And if you don't like it, that's fine too. But just know that I have integrity to what I've said. Then if you want to follow and help support somebody like myself to get into Congress on your behalf, and you don't have to live in my district to do this, follow us on social media, share it as much as you can. I ask people then to then go online onto our website and sign in to follow the campaign, sign up to volunteer in some way. If you want to follow Project Truth and get involved maybe in helping that, expand that, sign up there or make a donation. I'd like to ask everybody to do those simple things and make at least a $5 donation. I need to validate that people want a candidate like myself to represent them in Congress. And to do that so that I can get to some of the bigger donors who have the money to help, I need to show them in terms of numbers of people who have come online and are willing to support us. $5 or whatever you choose to give, but if you can give $5, that just gives me the ability to demonstrate that people care about these issues and want to fight on behalf of the policies that I'm putting forth in someone like myself. So those are the ways people can help. And I don't have a big machine. I've never ran for office before. I don't have a staff. I've got half a dozen hardcore volunteers right now that were just launched the campaign this week now. And now we're starting to reach out. I am so appreciative of you, Scarlett, for what you did for Kennedy, what you've done in inviting me here to help launch your podcast, to help me build a grassroots campaign so that I can stand up against the significant machine of the Uniparty and win this seat for the people.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, anything I can do to help, I am all out. This is for our children, our the future of our nation. So I do remember there's a lot of people have asked me like, what about in election integrity, because we are pretty sure Dave Min or the Democratic Party actually stole the election for Dave Min last year.
Our lack of voter integrity has been an issue I've been following for 12 years and gone to conferences on it. It's a huge issue. And what people don't understand, it's not that that they're aware of or cheating. The ROV here in Orange County and others, it's not being cheated that way. The voter rolls are being swollen with people who are no longer citizens or who no longer alive. People's social security numbers are taken from birth. They've swollen the rolls so that they can go in and manufacture votes depending on how many they need, which is why when we get past a vote on a closed date, there's so many things that they've done, making it a season of voting rather than a day of voting. Now, we know there's people who need to vote because they're overseas, they're sick, or there's other reasons for a small percentage of voters to have the opportunity to vote early, okay, or to have their vote at least cast early and be counted a little late. But we must go back to a system that closes the vote on a timely manner, has integrity to it. And there's significant research that's been done on how we can do that. And that is one of the major issues that we have to address. And there's some great people working on it right now here in Orange County and in our state, but Orange County in particular and nationally. This issue, we must build trust back into our votes and the outcomes of those so that we can really elect people that will represent us. One important note I want to make before we close on that point. Some of the leaders in this effort, it's not been just the Democratic Party. It's been what we refer to as the Uniparty. It's the old guard establishment. Yes. And some of the biggest blockages for changing the laws about votes come out of the old guard, and I refer to that as the old guard establishment Republican Party. They were some of the biggest stumbling blocks to trying to bring voter integrity in there because it was serving the establishment goals. And when I say the establishment goals, I'm talking about that's a broad term, but it encompasses a lot of subgroups, everything from the military industrial complex, the security state, the deep state, the administrative state, those who will have these huge global interests. It's a big group of people who benefit from the status quo and the direction we're heading. So for people to hear the term establishment, I would just like them to think of those who like the status quo, those who have benefited from the status quo. That's why we don't have immigration laws that work. We have these endless wars. We have a lack of voter integrity. We have a terrible voting system. The list is endless. But what it's done is it's allowed the status quo and those who benefit from it to enrich themselves and go forward. And we have to change that. It has to be the status quo. We have to shatter that and start rebuilding this house that was designed by our founding fathers and framers. It's been ossified, it's out of date, and we need to remodel it and make it modern and take the bones of it and build on that.
That is a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much, Michael. Hope you best of luck. Hope you enjoy your days, and be healthy, prosper, and may you win.
Thank you. One last note: there's nothing I'd rather be doing than this.
Okay, well, how about we do another episode sometime down the line?
Whenever I'm available. Whenever you want, I'm available to you, is what I meant to say.
Well, we'll stay in touch then. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scarlett.
Bye.
Bye-bye.